You're listening to Contesting Wrestling. Today, it's a big episode. This is the first episode you're listening to. I mean, hey, you know what? Jump in for a big episode. It's been roughly a year.
We're bad at math. So.
Yeah, we're not, and also, like, the question of when we actually started this is sort of open to debate. The October 5th is technically our release anniversary, but we started recording in June. Doesn't matter. This is a podcast that's about trying to understand wrestling, right? I'm somebody who, my name is Evan Burke. I'm somebody who historically doesn't care for wrestling, and when I had the idea, hey, it might be a fun podcast where these people who are some of my closest friends who I love and respect, who love wrestling and have an encyclopedic knowledge of it, it might be fun if you guys try to get me into this. We've now been doing this for a year, and it's been a ball, and I've learned a lot. Do I remember any of the things we've watched? No. Do I care?
You thankfully have a very selective memory, so you've been able to filter out enough that you're not overloaded, I think.
There's a big question of, would I watch wrestling of my own volition ever again if we stop this podcast tomorrow? Still don't know. I would probably keep tabs on Orange Cassidy. I don't know how much I would watch it, but...
Well, that's a big difference than the response to that it would have been a year ago, which is you would have been like, ha, 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 no, get away from me, no.
That is true. So that is a direct quote.
Although we haven't, the purpose of this podcast is not necessarily to get you to like wrestling. You have certainly softened on it a bunch.
It's just to force you to watch wrestling.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of all that.
Clockwork Orange style.
We enjoy your suffering, as we have stated many times before.
Also, I'm here now.
I'll explain what we're doing today, and then I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves, and we'll get into it. But today is going to be a revisitation of matches we covered in the first and second episodes, with the idea, have I learned more? Have I learned enough to interpret these matches differently? Because from what I did not listen to the old episodes, because listening to my own voice makes me want to hurl myself from the rooftops onto a group of people that I don't care for.
Which is also why you edit most of the episodes, because again, we enjoy your suffering.
Yes, exactly. It's fun. It's fun. After editing, after spending hours and hours slowly cutting out people's ahs and ums, I don't ever need to hear any of us talk ever again.
Flinging yourself off the roof onto a pile of people you don't care for is quite a spot that we've seen in certain indie matches.
One thing that has developed a lot over the course of this podcast is that now when I sort of walk through my elaborate revenge fantasies that occupy 60 to 80% of my imagination throughout the day, there is much more of a wrestling flavor to it. There's still the classic Evan style, imagining becoming close with the friends and family of the people who are my nemesis and slowly getting their loved ones to reject them, but then also at the end when we're at the party that their friends and family have thrown for me, in which they are basically formally announcing that they are casting this person who I don't like out of their life, I then also do the tombstone to them through the through the table with my cake on it. Right, that kind of stuff, or get them in the Boston Crab. That's
absolutely beautiful.
Hell of a Boston Crab in one of these matches.
Oh yeah. Let's you guys introduce yourselves, and then let's dig into today, because it's been a real journey this past year, I gotta say.
All right, well, my name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been in wrestling about a dozen years. I've done a little bit of everything in the business, in the ring, behind the scenes, announcing, commentary, production, all kinds of stuff. And I am here because I've known Evan for 20, and I'm having a lot of fun. And Professor, tell us a little bit about yourself there.
I'm Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy at Mercy College, longtime friend of Evan and Doc, and for slightly less time than that, Katie. And big fan of professional wrestler. Big fan of professional wrestling. Apparently,
fan professional wrestler.
Talking is not something that's working very well this morning.
You use up all your brain power at the school, as well you should.
And that's just started again, so I'm deep in.
We actually kidnapped his PhD, and when it's not in the room with him, he loses his powers.
I need that back, by the way.
I didn't realize that was how doctorates worked, but that is.
You
that is
know the
case, yeah.
ransom. Anyway, I am, as always, Katie the Rev, Katie Bella. I go by Rev Katie on Twitter. You can follow me there. I have been in wrestling since 2014, been watching wrestling since 2003, reffing 3 years now. And I just kind of wandered in here at some point. I don't know what happened. I came on as a guest, and they won't let me leave.
Nah. You add a flavor that none of us have.
Well,
I'm the
nice.
comic relief.
You are kind of the comic relief. When the three of us get too pretentious, you make a loud farting noise, and then we move on.
The wild card. I like that.
Yeah, the wild card. There you go. We need a wild card.
when we recorded our initial batch of episodes and played them for a bunch of friends, asking them, hey, like, which one of these do you think is good? Like, when we were trying to really figure out the direction for this podcast too, the reaction was so overwhelming that our initial episode with Katie was far and away the best that it seemed kind of stupid to not ask her to be a part of it, and I'm glad we did.
If it were up to me, we'd be like a dry as dust, totally analytic podcast like you'd hear on fucking NPR or like Radio Lab or something like that.
I mean,
but I'm glad we're not.
If it was up to Ben, we'd all watch 10 matches an episode and just hate everything.
Look, Ben, if you want to start a side podcast that's just you and me doing that, I'm down. You know I can do it. It'll be boring and nobody will care, but I'd like it.
Hell yeah.
If it was just me, it would be me. It would be like the first like 20 minutes, half hour of me just like getting really, really in depth into like why I think wrestling's bad and stupid, and then I would start feeling bad because of all of that negativity. And by the end of the podcast, I'd be like questioning myself, but like I'd be like depressed and still hate wrestling, but then also like, what even do things mean?
And you wouldn't actually finish any of the matches.
No.
Like, you'd go to review the matches and be like, well, I watched 2 minutes of this. I think I got the idea of what was supposed to be happening. I don't know.
Your judgment is the only thing that gets me to the end of many of the matches that we watch. Let's be frank about
And
it.
even then, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, that is, something that has changed over the years is I went into this with years, the 1 year that it's been. I went into this with the principle that while I was going to, try to have an open mind and be forgiving about wrestling, I wasn't going to give it any sort of special rule. Like the same way, like if there's an album I'm listening to and I get 4 songs into it and I think it sucks, like I won't listen to the rest of it. If there's a book I'm reading and I get 150 pages in and I really don't like it, like I'm not going to force myself to read the rest of it because life is too short to do that. So I do generally stick to the rule, like, if a match is like if I really can't do it and I really can't stand it, I'll turn it off. And I'll talk about that and why I did that on the podcast. That hasn't happened in a while. Like, that hasn't happened, like... Yeah, I can't think of the last time. There have been a couple that I've maybe had to rush through for time reasons, but there haven't been any that I like rage quit in a long time.
You're starting to absorb the wrestling fans' tolerance, incredible tolerance, for continuing to watch things that they absolutely hate.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It really is.
It's fun.
And that was
So much
something
fun.
that was something that initially I was confused about how, and I guess is still kind of my big issue with wrestling, and I am just very lucky that I'm being fed a curated list of high quality wrestling, which is that it still seems like there is a staggering amount of crap in comparison to how much there is, which would normally not be a big problem because like most books that are most fiction that's published is shit. But there's enough good stuff where you absolutely can just read great fiction your whole life and never read a shitty book. But wrestling, it seems like that in order for the good stuff to be meaningful and for you to understand what's going on, you do still need to wade through the shit. And
Yeah,
while
It's like part of the business model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's a, I often describe most wrestling shows as like a serial. It's like a comic book. You don't just read if you want to get into a certain comic book, you don't just read the best issues because you'll miss the overarching story. And that's the real appeal to being a wrestling fan. And that's what gets you through the the not so good stuff. But I mean, there is of course a limit. It depends on what percentage of each show is just bad. This is why I often say that I can't really watch Raw anymore. I'll occasionally catch an episode of Raw because it's 3 hours long, and sometimes there's very little on it that I care about or like.
It is wholly unwatchable.
Yeah, and it frustrates me when I see characters and wrestlers that I like, and I still don't care.
But there's also...
Whereas when I was a kid, there'd be wrestlers that I like doing almost nothing, and I'd be very happy to see it. And that wasn't because I was a kid. That's because they managed to... They want... Every time someone's on TV now, it has to be like an elaborate story, but most of those stories are terrible. Just give me Razor Ramon beating someone up for 5 minutes. That's good
looking
enough.
super cool doing it.
Yeah, I bet you they could do that with Bobby Lashley, and it would be great.
At the same time, like, for all of his faults, Jim Cornette very sort of honestly presented wrestling once as a hostage situation. They are holding hostage from you the thing that you actually want to see. And part of the enjoyment is like the crowd demanding that thing, and then finally the baby faces releasing the hostage that the crowd, loves and cares about back to them.
That being said, we would like to say here on Contesting Wrestling, our general opinion of Jim Cornette is he does, in fact, dookie with his pants on.
Indeed.
Yes.
I've seen it.
Well, they invented dookieing with your pants off in his mind within the last 25 years, so he just rejects it completely.
In all seriousness, though, I mean, I don't know if he likes to dookie with his pants on, but he does seem like the kind of guy who needs to get entirely naked when he takes a shit. Even in a public bathroom.
That's great.
Now, I think I had a great segue. All right.
It's gone.
It's gone, but I'll make a segue, which is that something that was immediately clear watching these two matches, because when we're covering from episode 1, Bret Austin from WrestleMania 13, and
yes. Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, the I Quit match from WrestleMania 13,
and then from our second episode, we're covering Bret versus Owen from WrestleMania 10.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
Now, when we first watched these,
I memorized 2 sentences.
That part of the exam.
when we first watched these matches, like, Evan, you seemed almost confused, which was to be expected. Like, your general reaction was you didn't necessarily enjoy them. There was a lot of, like, I don't know, a lot of downtime, and most of what we tried to explain to you was, well, you really just don't understand wrestling yet. Well, it has been a year since we've recorded those episodes, and it's been a lot of matches and a lot of styles, and I can say whatever your new reaction to these matches are, maybe you watched them and you were like, oh no, I know I hate them, but I know that your opinion now is much more informed, and I'm interested to see what you think about them.
So I would say the biggest thing is, I think one of the biggest revelations I've had, and I've talked about this a bunch, especially in recent episodes, really seeing how much being invested in the characters and the storyline and what the characters represent, how much that informs your experience of watching the in-ring match, right? Like how much
Yeah.
the context for I can't keep this no context character going. It doesn't make sense, so I'm going to drop it right now.
You now have what we like to call context.
Right.
The way in which that context I guess that was something that I really didn't understand initially. Was I wasn't a big sports fan, still not really a big sports fan. That has not changed. I guess I have maybe more of an understanding of sports a little bit compared to where I was a year ago. But yeah, I think the really realizing, I think I did not know how to interpret it as a sport or as a piece of theater or anything like that initially, right? I was like, this doesn't make sense to me as a sport. This doesn't make sense to me as a storyline or a TV show. And I guess now I do understand that fusion in a way where I feel like my basic takeaway from the two matches, I was able to interpret these two matches in a way that I was not the first
Like
time.
understand how the wrestling,
Yes.
what they're doing in the ring tells the story and how it connects to who their characters are. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
You can understand the logical conclusion from Owen versus Brett in that Owen is the superior heart. Said it. I'm not taking it back.
That I knew already.
Well, Katie, I have something along those lines. We'll get to it in a bit, because I really felt like I was watching these matches, especially Brett Owen, with somewhat new eyes after doing all of this heavy analysis for the last year.
Let me ask if you had a same thought. The match that this reminded me the most of all of the matches we have watched thus far, in terms of how it made me feel in how invested I was in the characters, was the Omega Ibushi match. Because
I can see that.
Yeah.
now I understand the gravity of the Brett and Owen of the Hart family engaging in a match at WrestleMania. Like I understand the they come from this dynasty, the oldest and the youngest, which even like that dynamic I could tell early on.
Well, Brett's not the oldest, but yeah,
But
He's one of the oldest.
he's one of the oldest.
But I was able, now, like, I remember you said to me something along the lines of, like, the moves that they are doing on each other tell a story, and I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, you didn't even know the language they were speaking, and
Yeah.
now you've taken a few lessons in that language. Like I think I already said this. One of your big takeaways was that you didn't perceive them to be doing anything through most of the match,
Yes.
because they were just putting each other in holds. Has that changed?
Well-
Can you see now that they are in fact doing something?
Well, the first time I was like, they're not doing anything. They're just putting each other in holds. And now I'm watching, like, oh my God, like, they're just putting each other in holds. And it's incredible.
Right.
Like, because
they're
that
not
is
going
still,
through any tables or
Because
doing
you
any
get the psychology
backflips.
of the holds now.
Well, because you can see how they are, Brett is this older, authoritative, traditional Brett as the face, the guy who is following the rules for the most part.
For the most part.
For the most part,
And you can see how Owen is his younger, better little brother.
and who is brash and is upset and is also like, and both believes he is better and also is still willing to play dirty anyway because fuck you. Like, or at least like, because I deserve it, and like, whatever, you beat the shit out of me all the time when we were growing up, so whatever, if I hurt your knee now and I beat you, I'm still better than you as a result. Yeah, I can see the story now. I remember the first time watching this just being hung up on, like, I remember us talking about reversals of fortune, and how I was like, I think just as a basic thing, like in sport, like that was something that never really grabbed me, was like, now they have the ball, now they have the ball, now they have the ball. And I think if I watched a soccer match or something, I would still largely feel that. Or like if I try to watch a football match, I still like don't really care all that much about, now with these guys.
That's because it's literally just sports at that point.
Yes.
There's no psychology. They're there to win.
Yeah, sometimes it's a good story, and sometimes it's just not.
I think the best heel victory in the history of footballs is still that one that bore that gift with the Patriots. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. You know the gif, right?
Oh yeah.
I do
image?
remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that I think I made a mistake early on, because the reason we watched this episode is I asked you, what do you think the best match ever is? Or like, what do you think your favorite match is? And in my head, I was like, well, if this is the best match, then this must be the best match for me to watch, right? And I now I now think, like, yeah, I should have perhaps phrased it as, what do you think is the most accessible match, for which we watched Eddie Ray at Halloween Havoc 97, and that is the match that is still, that is apparently the perennial classic for getting your friends into wrestling. I would still
everyone
say
loves
that's the
that
right
match.
one to do. That was certainly the first one that really affected me. The not counting we watched that before we watched Undertaker Edge with Charles Robinson's slide, because that was the first
great.
moment of pure joy I felt in wrestling, watching Charles Robinson slide into that.
Still brings me joy. Like, I don't even have to watch it. I feel the image in my head, and it brings me joy. And that is why Charles Robinson is one of the greatest referees of all time.
Having just done a few episodes about Rey Mysterio, who was somebody who I enjoyed beforehand, and to me is a more accessible. You can watch Rey Mysterio and not have any understanding of the language of wrestling and still get it in a way that, yeah, I definitely had to learn. I had to learn how this works for this to make sense to me. It's kind of like how Tolstoy is the more boring of the classic Russian authors in English, but everybody who can read Russian says that he's the best in Russian.
Yeah, and I was thinking something kind of along those lines. If somebody's never read a book before, and they're like, "Well, what's the best book ever?" and then you recommend them, some 1,000-page tome like War and Peace or something, you're doing them a huge disservice. It's like, maybe if that person already has the maturity of an adult, you don't start them with like the extended works of Richard Scarry or something, but you start them off easy. Maybe you give them The Hobbit. And they read it, and they're like, "Oh, that told a story." And then you give them something more complicated.
Don't give them The Hobbit.
No, The Hobbit's a good story to start with. It's
I
simple.
couldn't.
You walk right through it. I read it when I was 5.
I tried, and I just was bored.
I think
fast.
I had a much
Well,
longer
I mean,
attention
and
span when I was 5.
That to me proves that Doc Diamondfire is smarter than the man with the actual PhD.
Hey, man, I put it down and I picked up 1984, so,
Yeah, I thought The Fellowship
Look
became very boring.
at Ben reading 1984 at the age of 5.
I wasn't 5, but, I was
At the
like
age of
8.
3.
I was 10 when I read the first 4 Dune books, and
oh man.
And which was too young to really get it, but should, but those are books that it's okay to read if you're too young, because they're still that's Dune is awesome in part because it's if you just want a dumb Star Wars kind of book, it's Star Wars took a lot from Dune, but it's if you want a dumb adventure, it's got that, and then if you want to read into it more, it's got that. But then my father would not let me read books 5 and 6, which, if you have read, any listeners who have read the last 2 Dune novels will understand why it is very not appropriate for a 10-year-old to read those.
I reacted that way about The Hobbit also because I've never read the Lord of the Rings. And a lot of people have told me that the reason for that is because I tried to start with The Hobbit. And I shouldn't
I don't
have
know
done
about that. I mean, maybe you'd be more into the Lord of the Rings proper. Personally, I like the Lord of the Rings, okay, but the Fellowship is a real slog. It's here's a little bit of plot. Okay, now it's okay, so you know how in most fantasy it'll be and then the party sat around the fire and told stories. End of chapter. Beginning of chapter. It's morning. Well, in the Fellowship of the Ring, it's more and then the party sat down around the fire to tell stories. And here are those stories. And it's 80 pages of the elves just going on about nothing that has anything to do with the rest of the story.
Well, I kind of like that structure, though. I love the Canterbury Tales and stuff,
I'll tell you right now, as somebody who I loved the Lord of the Rings, read them multiple times as a child, tried to read them again as an adult and could not do it, and it's because J.R.R. Tolkien has the affliction that every English author from the late 1800s and early 1900s has, which is
inbreeding.
He has 2 problems. Well, but it's that for every 1 page of meaningful character development or dialogue or interesting things happening, there are 4 pages of descriptions of foliage.
Yeah. It gets old. It gets really old.
I get that it's pretty there because it rains a lot. but like same thing. Like I tried to read Children of Men, P.D. James, and like knowing that it was very different from the movie and not like an action-y thing or anything. And it's like, this crazy sci-fi novel about like what will happen in a dystopian future. People aren't having kids. Fucking 4/5 of the book is descriptions of the English countryside, and I'm just like, oh my god, nobody cares. No, I guess the English cared in 1920, but
In a way, that's better for children because it takes a child with a malleable brain and it builds a world for them to put themselves in, regardless of any plot or what's happening.
Totally.
Like, yeah, dragons, great. I want to be in this world and check it out.
I think that's a really good. I think it's a really good observation.
All right. So speaking of meaningful character development
Hey there.
and a lack of foliage. So watching this match, and I've watched this match dozens of times, Bret versus Owen at WrestleMania 10. And I really felt like I was watching it anew this time, and I was a huge Bret Hart fan growing up, as we've already established on this podcast.
Brett.
I loved Bret.
Brett, we said it at the same time.
But watching it this time, I found it fascinating because despite the fact that Owen is just a perfect bastard, right? And he's just, he cheats and he brags for no reason. Like they lock up to begin with, and then he immediately turns around and cheers for himself and celebrates for doing nothing. Despite him being like a perfect heel the whole match, you kind of can't, and despite the crowd being behind Bret as well, you can't help but freaking root for Owen. Like, Bret has this kind of quiet arrogance to him, which is, he's always had and continued to have, and that sort of plays into the Austin match as well. But like here, it's like, he knocks Owen out of the ring and he does like a fist pump, like, yeah, I got him. And then he goes and he throws Owen back in the ring and he's like, come on, man, why did you do all this shit? Like, try to fight me. Like, I'm better than you.
How
I'm
about
gonna
it, Owen Hart? How about it? I have the commentary in this match burned in my brain and have for 20 years.
Exactly. And it's just like,
25 years.
Bret.
28 years,
like,
maybe. Yeah.
You didn't want to fight your brother because, like, you're the best and you don't want to beat him up. But, maybe you're not. And then as Owen starts to, like, get the advantage in the match, Bret loses his mind. Like he starts acting like Owen. He starts complaining about the ref's counts. He starts like taking more risks. He starts even doing some of Owen's moves, like the Insiguri, and he goes for the fucking pile driver on his little brother who he didn't want to fight.
And Owen, by the way, takes the pile driver like it's supposed to look. You see a lot of guys who want to do the pile driver, and they either kind of roll to their butt, or the guy taking its head is so tucked it all looks kind of a weird pile. Owen Hart bounces directly in the air after that pile driver. He made it look, and of course Bret, knew how to base for it. He made it look like Bret was trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And this, of course, was after Owen did the tombstone pile driver to Bret. Because, hey, Taker wasn't booked on this card. Why not? Who's going to stop him?
And when Owen deigns to try to put the sharpshooter on Bret, what does Bret do? He punches him in the face. It's like the first
Bret
strike
always
of the
wondered
match.
why people didn't do that to him.
Right. So, yeah, no, really watching it this time.
I'll take that one step further. When you watch Bret apply the sharpshooter, he always kept his chest up and his face out. Owen was bending over. And if you're bending over, you're within punching range.
And, what's really cool about this match, when you think about it in that way, and like, given my reaction this time, it's like the match was designed to put Owen over. Right? Not just that he was going to win, but to make him into a major star. So even though, the story of the match is that Bret is the babyface, you still, part of it was to kind of get the crowd into Owen's character. And so they wanted to kind of make Owen look better than Bret in the match. And they accomplished that. And that's why it's just, to me, it's a really beautiful piece of wrestling storytelling. And like any really great piece of art, it should reward you with new things every single time you watch it. And
I mean, I'm always more into Owen in this match. Anytime I've watched it.
Yeah, it was a giant coming out party for Owen Hart. He had been on TV for a few years. Nothing had really worked. And this was like, This was them setting him up for his new character that he would have for the next several years, really. And him and Brett would feud for the next several months.
On the sharpshooter thing, their sharpshooters are different. Brett puts his left leg through, and Owen puts his right leg through. And also, I found that Brett has the legs cinched up a little bit tighter, whereas Owen gets a little bit more torque leaning back on the opponent's back. And I thought that was kind of cool that Owen, gave his own spin to the move.
I have a question that I may have asked before at some point. But one thing that always confuses me about the sharpshooter. So when Brett does the sharpshooter on people, he like wraps their leg up and turns around, and it's like this effective submission hold. When I was a youth, some friend of mine, very possibly you, but it could have been somebody else, would always say, "Hey, I'm going to put you in the sharpshooter," and I would be like, "No," and then we would fight. And the way, and when in like middle school, when like you're just beating the shit out of each other all the time, and like middle school, early high school, somewhere around there. So I have a memory of somebody being like, "I'm gonna put you in the sharpshooter," and then they would start doing it, and then they would just they would get me on the floor and then just kick me in the balls. But it happened a few times where I thought that was the sharpshooter. Was that just when you got somebody on the ground and got their legs apart and kicked them in the balls? So was that this guy? Was that just a friend of mine was a piece of shit?
Yeah.
Fred was a piece of shit.
Cool.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, anytime I tried to put
mystery friend, I don't quite remember. I'm glad I don't remember you. You don't matter.
Anytime I tried to put someone in the sharpshooter, like first they have to let you put them in the sharpshooter, and you hold their legs apart and you start to put your foot through their legs, and they're like, hey, don't kick me in the balls, because that's what they think is going to happen. And you have to reassure them, no, I'm not trying to stomp on your balls. Let me put my leg through so that I can then apply the hold. But your friend, was just a dick.
Okay.
Almost nobody has a good sharpshooter. Brett and Owen both have good sharpshooters. Because if you don't put the sharpshooter on right, it just looks like somebody's laying on their stomach with their knees bent. And that's not a hold.
In the next match, too, there were a few holds where I was like, that doesn't look like anything. We're like, I still feel like this doesn't look like anything is happening. Like, that doesn't look like that's hard to be in that position.
Well, also, Austin tries to put on the sharpshooter at one point, and you can tell he's doing it completely wrong.
Most people, you see this with kids like of our generation. Brett always looked so smooth when he put it on. You think, well, I can do that. And then you can't do that.
Now, was this match I know you said that Austin wrestled most of his career after with like somewhat limited mobility because he.
This is before the broken neck.
This is before
that.
So this is Austin at peak physicality.
If you look when he goes on the turnbuckle to do his like pre-match talk, the way he moves his head around tells you that it's pre-broken neck. Because after his broken neck, his neck never moved that degree again.
He really has a body language that is unlike anybody I've ever seen. Like
his charisma was off the charts.
He could perform to the big rooms, as they used to say about Jerry Lawler when he would fill the Memphis Coliseum every week. You could tell in the cheapest seats by looking at Steve Austin's back what the expression on his face is.
Yeah, man, it's really impressive. Like he simultaneously is communicating like, I'm probably a little drunk. I would like to hurt you, and just so you know, while I'm hurting you, I do not perceive your life as having value. So it will not matter to me. Oh, and then also the consequences are irrelevant to me.
And amazing,
he communicates all that walking to the ring.
Yeah.
And amazingly, like, that was your top babyface of the Attitude Era.
I mean, that's fitting for the late 90s.
So something that is interesting about Brett and Austin is that, and we kind of touched on this a little bit in the previous match, because Bret Hart does sort of exemplify in America, we need our heroes to be the underdog and also like buff supermen who are clearly going to win. Right, like, and
it's a problem,
and especially in the 80s and 90s, we kind of needed them to be underdogs and bullies, because we thought both of those things were cool. And both of those things were like the things you should be that you wanted to kind of root for and win. And I feel like this is the passing of a torch of one style of underdog bully who's also a buff Superman to a different style of underdog bully who's a buff Superman.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it, and it's not completely inaccurate.
I mean, so, all right, I had a lot of thoughts about Brett watching this match again.
Brett,
I always
Brett,
have thoughts
Brett.
about Brett. But, so, okay, watching the video package, the first thing I always think when I see that video package is, how can anybody watch that and think that Brett wasn't in on the Montreal screw job? Because it's all this, you screwed, everybody's screwing me, whole thing. Like, that's the story, is that they're screwing him. But anyway, but then it got me thinking, like, why is the Montreal screw job like this kind of open question? Why do we believe that it was a shoot, that Brett wasn't in on it to begin with? And it's this. With Bret Hart, the distinction between his character and the real guy, Bret Sargent Hart, that's his middle name, his fucking Stu name.
Wow. Did he name his other kids
Sergeant.
like Colonel and Lieutenant and like
don't know.
instill a sense of hierarchy, irrespective of their age? That would be fucked up.
So, but the distinction between Bret Hart the person and Bret Hart the character is undetectable. The story of Bret Hart in the WWF is, as far as we know, the story of the real life Bret Hart, frustrated with his position on the card and all this shit. And that's
Always taking himself so seriously.
So that's either him, there not being a distinction between the character and the person, and him really believing it as much as anybody could actually believe it, who's like a performer in wrestling, or him just being by far the greatest worker and con man of all time. And it's one or the other.
I mean, I feel like it's all wrestlers are walking like an L. Ron Hubbard kind of line, right? Because if you really
Go on.
if you really delve into the history of L. Ron Hubbard, the big question about him is how much did he believe his own bullshit? Because it really does seem like he was just able to simultaneously know, obviously, that he was a con man and a shyster, just selling people on arguably the most successful grift of all time, or at least of the 20th century. And also, there is no way he could have said and done all of those things without buying into it to a huge degree, because there is a certain level of authenticity that I think even the greatest actors can't really do. And
I mean, he was a force of evil.
When Diamond Dallas Page won the WCW title after a long and very storied career, a very unlikely champion. If you would have talked about him 5 or 6 years previously, he said that he talked to Dusty Rhodes on the phone about it, and Dusty asked him, how does it feel? And Page said, it feels real, Dream, it feels real. And Dusty said to him, that's 'cause it is. And that's the whole conversation, and that's the mindset you got to have. And yeah, the Bret Hart didn't play Bret Hart. Bret Hart is Bret Hart.
You look at the look on his face when he comes to the ring in this match, the dejection, the like grimace, and he still gives the glasses to the fan and whatever, but like that comes across so palpably.
Blah, 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 blah. Once again, we have Ben's PhD hostage. We are not giving it back. We each demand $50K.
Just to be clear, you are not a words doctor. You are a ideas/concepts doctor.
There you go. Yeah. They exist in the logical space in my head without even having symbols assigned to them.
No, yeah, they're just floating entities.
That's far out,
It's
man.
all the Prince symbol too, oddly enough.
It's, the language of thought, as Jerry Fodor put it. God, I really can't talk. Anyway, last night, Doc texted me while we were both watching these matches and was like, damn, that finish with Brett and Austin just gets better every time. And I was thinking a very similar thing.
And that shot of Austin like bleeding down the face that they used in everything for until now, actually.
Yeah.
Still now.
It's the juxtaposition of his face covered in blood, the agony etched in the lines on his face, and his hands on the mat pushing up, trying still to break free of the trap that he was in.
And he
wasn't
almost
just
broke
laying
it.
there and taking it. He broke the sharpshooter, but he didn't have the strength to do anything else.
Yeah.
The only part, it was funny, the only part of that ending suite there before he passes out is that really strains credulity at all, because the whole thing is so believable. Is there's one point where he pushes up and he pushes Brett up, and you hear when one of the announcers goes, "Impossible!" And you're looking at it and you're like, that is actually impossible. I mean, if Brett had all of his weight on him, there's no way, even if he hadn't lost a lot of blood, that he would be able to get all the way up like that.
I don't know about that.
It depends. It's a test of strength. And I would certainly believe that Austin would have been sapped of a lot of strength. But, I mean, what they were communicating, like you said, to compare this to the Owen Hart match, the idea was to get Austin over, much in the same way the idea was to get Owen over, and it was up to Brett to do that. And Brett did it, and is like, "Yeah, you're gonna break my hold." And mark my words, Austin would not have broken the sharpshooter if Bret Hart didn't want him to break the sharpshooter for a reason, and he did. And when he did, the crowd went insane, and that's the moment that Austin got basically got the torch as that character who's the underdog, but also the super ass kicker that you talk about, Evan.
Well, and it's also interesting that he, even though, and I guess this is the general deal with Austin, is that he was a face, even though he was clearly a bad person. That this is very much, even though it's a match to get Austin over, and it's a match in which Austin is really kind of more the face, right? And yet,
By the end.
Right, because this is a turn.
This is the double turn.
And yet, it is also very much feels like Austin trying to drag Brett down to hell, where Brett is like, "No, I'm here to maintain tradition and to be classy and do all this stuff," and Austin's like, "I'm going to take a shit all over that." Because fuck you, and I'm going to make you wrestle me the way I would wrestle me.
But not just that, to reveal the hypocrisy that he believes is at the heart of Bret Hart, which we've already seen in the Owen match. It's there. All of that tradition and all of that respect and whatever that Bret holds himself up to, really, if you push him hard enough, it all fucking goes away. Anyway, whether he's wrestling his brother or he's wrestling Steve Austin.
And the difference between Owen and Austin is Owen didn't cheat in the match with Bret to win. He cheated just to piss Bret off. He didn't pull Bret's tights when he covered him. He pulled his hair when they were standing there. He kicked him in the face when he didn't have to. Austin's cheating, even though this is a no disqualification match, Austin's dirty tactics are violence. Austin's like, "Come on, Bret, I know that, we're just going to brawl because I'm going to brawl, and all your technical stuff isn't going to save you from a punch in the mouth. Show everybody who you really are." And of course he did. And it finally spilled over after the match, because that was really it. The wrestling fans had gotten used to the idea of, all right, so Bret Hart is this honorable champion, but once the heel shows that this is going to be a dirty fight, well, Bret can get dirty with the heels, and that is a noble thing in wrestling. It's very direct in British wrestling rounds, where they would have a ref throw down a yellow card on a wrestler for cheating, so that if the heel gets away with it, the babyface will just do it too in front of the ref, and the ref won't throw down a card because, as the announcer will say directly, well, it's turnabout, so that's fair.
I mean, here we just have Ref Ken Shamrock and his giant shoulders.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I
tearing out of the ref shirt.
I think I just didn't really understand how much of a cartoon character he appeared to be in this match. I guess I was just absorbing wrestling in general. It's I guess this is what refs are like. I don't know. And then now watching this beefy slab of a man poured into a tiny. He looks like a ref in a wrestling themed gay porn. Really, is what he looks like.
He does.
You're not wrong.
But
I like how he's announced as from the world of Ultimate Fighting, which is what it was known as at the time.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to say about Bret during that finish, it feeds into what I was saying about the indiscernibility of the line between his character and real life. Like, you see on his face when he has the sharpshooter, he's just like, nah, yeah, come on, give up. As if his entire self-respect and life and everything about his identity depends on Stone Cold Steve Austin submitting.
To this hold that somebody needs to help you to put them in that hold.
Well, yeah, right. Forget about that part. But you're right, yeah.
No, I'm saying that's part of what makes it so insane.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Fact that he looks like that on his face, and he is not a good actor, right? Like, acting
he's not
isn't what
acting.
he's doing.
It's real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's real, but it's not real.
Right.
It's
No,
making it up.
Exactly.
Steve Austin let him do that.
Yes.
That's wrestling.
100%.
Right?
Exactly.
So, and then when Austin passes out and Brett doesn't get that satisfaction of him submitting, like, his complete dissatisfaction is so real and so evident and so palpable. Like, and so you understand why he attacks Austin after the match or whatever. Like, I don't know. I believe that Brett really was staking his life on Austin submitting to that hold that, as you said, Austin let him put on him.
That they both know what's going to happen.
So the question then becomes, when we're talking about the dichotomy between the wrestler and the man, especially with Bret Hart, is that, okay, so whatever we say, there is a difference between what Bret is doing in front of the audience and what Bret is doing, just with his friends and family. But which one of those two is the real Bret Hart? And with Bret, I think he allowed the person in front of the audience to be the real Bret Hart.
Possibly. And that, that goes back to what we were saying recently when we, our last episode about Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, and like how much you put into the show to the point where you've sort of left behind your real life, your real life, in the sense that now this fictional life is what's real for you. But I think, I don't know how deep it goes for Bret. I don't know how many friends or family members get to see someone other than the worker. I don't know. We talk about like how like Bret always took himself too seriously, and anyone you ask who was in the locker room with him will say that he took himself too seriously. Well, how much was he working all of those guys the whole time? And that's the thing with wrestling. Like, you don't know. It's opaque at every level.
And then you got a guy. There's a lot of parallels there with a guy like Steve Austin, who, I mean, as far as he came in, his character seems to basically be himself, and then after he left the WWE, he was still like a violent, drunken asshole, but just to like the women in his life instead of other guys in the ring.
Yes, while we're talking about Steve Austin, I do just want to mention, never forget that he beat the shit out of Deborah McMichael.
Yeah, even if he tweets things,
in real life,
even if he like says something like a statement that's really like, oh wow, that's an awesome thing to say, because he does sometimes say.
Just always remember that.
Just always remember that.
Like, it was just like in the last year, she was finally comfortable enough to be able to do an interview where she gave, like, the exact details of what happened, and it's not good.
As a society, we should be able to forgive people who say shitty things and do stuff like that. But then, like, if it's people who were like, oh, I beat the shit out of my wife, but now I say things that are the kind of woke on the internet, yeah, no, fuck you, man. Because you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, at least with Randy Orton, he's woke now. He never... I mean, maybe he
As far as we know.
He harassed people backstage.
Shitting people's bags and stuff.
The woman in question.
Yeah.
Evan seems to be pro-bag shitting.
I'm not pro-bag shitting, but we do need to be able to have room to forgive people for bag shitting.
I want to clarify that the woman in question that the bag shitting story was always about went on record and said there was no actual feces involved. It was more just like he poured baby oil and shit in her bags and ruined her stuff.
It's still pretty bad, but I guess that's
a
whole level down.
There was no actual fecal matter involved. That Jerry Lawler's crown, however, shoot legit feces.
There has to be room to forgive assholes while still being wary of legitimately bad people. And there's a lot of gray area, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any case, there's room for some kind of forgiveness, even if it's not like, like people can
not
atone
absolution.
for bad things. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly, not
Yes.
absolution.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You have to take into account track record.
Right,
I think
right,
is
right.
an important thing.
Yep, a book that I don't know if it ever came out. I think it did. One of Mick Foley's novels that I didn't read because I read Teed and Brown, and I was like, that was something. I'm not reading another one of your fiction books.
You said it was really fucked up, right?
Yeah. If you ever want to read like torture porn, I mean, I guess you shouldn't be surprised. That's the thing. You look at Mick Foley, and he's the nicest guy in
He's
the world.
literally Santa.
And like, he said in one of his autobiographies, and I've said this here when we did our Mick Foley, like several episodes, what his goal at that point in life was for young wrestling fans to be told, see that guy Mick Foley? Yeah, he was the sickest son of a bitch you'd ever seen. And for the younger wrestling fans not to believe you. And he has achieved that 100%. And like one of his novels, he said the main character, the idea was he did something horribly consequential early in his life that cost the lives of several people, and the entire rest of his life he's spent saving people and doing as good as he can. And the theme in the book is, are you to be judged by the worst thing you've ever done, or are you to be judged by all the rest of it? Now, other than beating the shit out of Deborah, Steve Austin certainly has not been a saint. There's not a one-to-one thing there, but it is something to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Evan's point, just saying some woke shit is not,
just saying some
but
woke shit is
devoting
not-
your life to,
Yeah.
domestic abuse outreach and things like that, that
which he has not done.
no, he's not done that either.
And it's also, varying levels of like what that price like looks like. Like I keep thinking of, there was that guy who like was running for office recently he was super young. He was like 19, and he'd done some like incredibly like shady like revenge porn shit or something to an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And there was this argument going on where people were like, oh, so what? He should pay for that for the rest of his life? And it's like, nobody's saying he should necessarily pay for it for the rest of his life, but maybe he shouldn't run for fucking office a couple years. You know what I mean? Like there's like, I'm not saying like, let's gulag everybody who like does something shitty forever, but like maybe you don't need to be a public figure anymore.
Also, the amount of time matters. Saying you did that kind of thing like 3 or 4 years ago is different than saying you did that kind of thing 20 or 30 years ago. And at this point, he had done it a few years ago.
So with Bret Austin, so Bret Owen is a better match between the two.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was actually really looking forward to watching that again. I wasn't looking forward. I mean, damn it, I'm in fucking print now, writing about the Bret Austin. Like I've been thinking about the Bret Austin match for so long. Like I didn't really want to very much anymore, but I still enjoyed watching it again. But yeah, Bret Owen is just, it's a real masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece, yeah.
I remember thinking Bret Austin was gross the first time I watched it. And this time I was like, I think the first time I was like, oh God, this is gross. And this time I was like, oh, this is gross. Like, yeah. Still,
That's
I mean,
good.
still, there's one point where Austin comes up and it's like clotting and also coming out, and it's like, oh, I don't need this. This is too. But I think he also was surprised. I don't think he was trying to get that much blood out. I think he
he hit a
fucked up.
gusher.
Yeah.
But the wrestling fan is starting to rub off on you a little bit, Evan. You're
Yes,
developing a
good.
taste for the gruesome that you didn't
They
have.
used to be sure to put the pictures of people bleeding on the cover of wrestling magazines because it sold. Red equals green, as they used to say, which is a horrible thing to say, by the way.
And it's still,
even though it's definitely true in some aspects.
and while this is not in any way an original observation or something, but it's still, it always blows my mind how much, like, we can watch this match where a man loses a liter of blood onto the ring, gruesomely, is like made to be in such pain that he screams and passes out and all this stuff, but no titties, and you can't say the word shit or anything worse than that. It's still
Right.
like, it really, we're sick. We are a fucked up society.
Yeah. I don't know if we pointed this out last time, but like there's some announcer stuff that I wanted to draw attention to here.
Yeah.
JR, first of all, saying it's not about the past, about posing or covering a bald spot, which is a nice dig at WCW and Hogan at the time. And I didn't notice they foreshadow the ending, I guess, to make sure that the crowd would understand it, or that the viewer at home would understand it. When they say, if Shamrock stops this match without a submission, Austin would attempt to kill him, JR says. And then Vince says, in essence, that would be a submission. So just to let you know beforehand, this is like 5 minutes before the end, that if Shamrock stops the match, like that is a legitimate way to end it.
Because that's also a finish that comes to you from the world of Ultimate Fighting, along with Ken Shamrock, is that the ref stops the match. Most MMA fights these days are stopped by the ref judging, okay, this guy's done. In the very early days, like one of their sticking points, like one of their bragging points was that like nobody was going to stop the match unless like extreme circumstances happened. And
like someone pulled a knife.
Yeah, right. And they got rid of that real quick once they realized how important a strong referee is to stopping a match.
Oh, man.
In the first UFC event, like the only rule was you couldn't gouge someone's eyes, I think. But you could kick someone in the balls. So one guy did what Evan would describe as the sharpshooter over and over again to somebody, basically. And the other guy just wasn't giving up because it's like, well, I'm not going to give up. And people are like, oh.
That's what we're calling the dick kicks from now on this podcast. Is the sharpshooter.
Evan Sharpshooters, yeah.
I admit, I embellished that a little for the line. He was really just repeatedly punching his opponent right in the balls over and over again.
Well, and they
had to put a stop to it.
There was another fight I remember from one of those early pay-per-views where the guy just like kept pummeling the dude in the face, and he didn't pass out completely, and he didn't give up, and he just smashed his face like completely. It was horrible.
Like, now if a guy gets an extra one punch in after the fans think the ref should have stopped it, the ref gets a lot of shit because it's up to the ref to literally tackle the guy on top, because it's also on the guy on top not to stop until the ref stops you. Yeah, but sometimes you'll see a fight where like the guy will punch the dude in the face a few times and then take half a second and look at the ref, and it's like, now, okay, and then they just keep going because they don't really want to hurt the guy they're in the octagon with. They're sportsmen, before and after the fight. They'll probably touch gloves and be friends. This is their job.
Yeah, they don't want to force them to wear an orthopedic tuxedo.
Oh, that was great. That is a wonderful concept.
Jerry Lawler, man, has some great shit in that Bret Owen match. Like, just the whole time. And especially for a guy, he always feuded with Bret, but he gave Owen a lot of shit when he was a babyface. And then just completely siding with Owen the whole time is fantastic. And then even in the Bret Austin match, Lawler, still hates Bret, even though Bret ends up being the heel.
Lawler hates Bret like for years and years. The entire time Bret's a babyface, Lawler is just a thorn in his side.
What I think would be fun if you had a match that was like a guns versus guns match where you had like one huge guy with giant ripped arms and then like one little like skinny guy with guns.
There is a tag team called the Motor City Machine Guns.
Yes, they don't bring out guns. But
they don't bring out guns. They are one of the greatest tag teams of our era, though.
They did have to have their original name, the Murder City Machine Guns, vetoed for television.
It is a joke that would wear thin, but I would like to see more guns in wrestling. On that,
I got one clip to show you, and I will show it to you at my earliest convenience. It's not long, and it's like it's one of the most TNA clips to ever TNA.
I'm already okay. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
There's also
are you going to show me just somebody actually getting shot at a TNA match? Because it feels like that's what would happen.
No. It's a great just minute of television.
There's also an incident involving a gun, not in the ring, but in a vignette that we'll watch when we do a Brian Pillman episode, which will come up pretty soon.
We'll probably end up just watching that entire episode of Raw because the what we're talking about is the thread that goes through it. And Raw was 1 hour minus commercials at the time, so that helps.
Yeah,
we watched
not
matches
3.
longer than that. Yeah, not 3.
3.
Do we have any final thoughts today?
Well, I wanted to ask you one more thing,
Yeah.
since we've been talking about Brett a lot, and Brett, are you starting to get Brett a little bit more after revisiting these matches,
I
Evan?
think so. Yeah, I think I definitely have a much more of an appreciation for his style of wrestling, which I think is something that you have to learn.
His
because
excellence of execution.
yes, yeah, it's not immediately flashy or it's not immediately clear to somebody who doesn't have a knowledge of the sport. Why
He has a
he's
distinctive
good.
way of doing everything.
Yes.
Like just even getting in and out of the ring, is stylized.
I always noted the way he got in. This is all very realistic, right? He gets up on the apron. He looks at his opponent. He puts one leg over the second rope, not stopping looking at his opponent. Quickly goes. He doesn't bend over to go under the bottom rope. He pushes his butt down and does a squat, and then keeping his back as straight as possible, he quickly switches to inside of the ring, and then he brings his other leg in. So at no point can his opponent jump him while he's getting in the ring and vulnerable. It's a little thing, and I always notice it with Brett.
There is a surgical, vibe to what he does.
Yeah.
That is interesting. That's intimidating. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get it, and also just making sense of him in the context of wrestling moving away from the '80s, but before you hit the completely new approach of the Attitude Era, and sort of like what was meaningful to America at the time. What was a hero at the time. And then also you talking about how more than almost anybody else, it is hard to see where the lines are for Brett, and that's what's interesting.
The short
him and Ric Flair.
Yeah, the short period of time when a Canadian could be the great American hero of pro wrestling.
It's like how all of our great action actors are Australian now, because that's
How about that?
Except for I was about to say Keanu Reeves, but he's Canadian, isn't he?
I think he is.
I think he is. I think he's Canadian. Yeah, I always think he's Hawaiian. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This has been Contesting Wrestling. I hope that, I don't know, if you've been with us since the beginning, if you've been with us since more recently than that, but you have come to enjoy this podcast, I hope that today was cool. If you haven't heard our first two episodes, you should go back and listen to them and see if there is a big difference. I did not go back and listen, so I don't even really know how much of the difference there is in my perception from an outside perspective. So yeah, I don't know. This has been great. I'm still not tired of this. I still feel like I have a lot to learn. I still don't want to actually just start watching wrestling because I think I'll start hating it immediately. So I'll stick with this thing that we do where you guys just pick the good stuff and tell me to watch it.
It's enough.
Or the bad stuff.
That's the right
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
If you enjoyed what we did today, you should follow us on Twitter at ContestingW. Interact with us in any way you see fit. And if you really enjoyed what we did today, you should become a patron of ours on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling. For $5 a month, you get access to a bonus episode every week. And for $1 a month, you get advance episode. You get episodes from the free feed in advance when I can do them in advance. I know that hasn't been happening. Sorry to our $1 tier listeners. And then you also get to just say thank you, and we appreciate that as we are on a quest to perhaps one day not have to work quite so many hours and supplement that income with talking about wrestling. And then, and if we get,
That's the dream.
If you want to hear me suffer more, join the Patreon, and I will just have more shit I have to watch.
Yeah, just to put that into perspective, by now we have well over 40 episodes that you unlock if you join our Patreon.
Give us money.
We have been consistently putting out a bonus episode every week reflecting on our current episodes. And by now we have several episodes on our Patreon where we are going through Lucha Underground, couple episodes at a time, and that's just starting to heat up. So jump on in and enjoy.
We've also got a couple
money is-
episodes of our Hollywood Backlot Film Club where we review movies involving wrestlers.
Your money is our money.
And we will spend it on drugs.
Now, this has been Contesting Wrestling.
But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you.
Peace.
Bye.